You know Dasher, a dancer and...
Boomers had the Vietnam War, the Cold War, the space race, civil rights battles, assassinations of two Kennedys, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, and so much more. Let's explore why boomers can't stop talking about the 60s. Number 30. Fun adventures. Boomers remember wandering all over the extended neighborhood on their own or with friends. A group of 7 to 12-year-olds pooled their savings and possibly borrowed some money on a Saturday afternoon. Then they walked 2 miles to the beach without parental permission and returned home before nightfall. In rural areas, children often enjoyed a simpler lifestyle. Long bicycle rides to nearby towns were common, with fishing poles strapped across handlebars for adventures at ponds or creeks. Unrestricted freedom allowed for building fires, roasting food, and target practice with BB guns. This simpler time is often romanticized as a period of unmatched freedom and enjoyment. Number 29. Creepy crawlers and BB guns. Shooting BB guns was a popular pastime in those days. Early evenings were spent targeting cicadas high up in the trees. Ducks would follow the group around, eagerly swallowing any cicadas that fell to the ground. If the cicada was still alive when the ducks gobbled it down, a faint buzzing could be heard from within the duck as it waddled along. Creepy crawlers were a popular toy. They came in various colors of goo, even glow-in-the-dark varieties. Children would cook the goo on the stovetop, which emitted an unpleasant odor that often annoyed parents. This memory was unexpected and brought back memories of a bygone era.
Okay, you see I filled the dinosaur up, and it came through with this little pick that you can...
Number 28. Leading industrial power. The boomer generation, born after the hardships of the Great Depression and 2 world wars, benefited greatly from the government's safety nets and economic boom. While the world's factories were destroyed during World War II, the U.S. invested heavily in its own, becoming the world's leading industrial power. This period instilled in the baby boomers a strong work ethic and a belief that hard work would lead to success. However, they may not have had recognized the unique advantages they enjoyed, such as government assistance in securing homes and jobs. Number 27. Healthy job market. They got paid living wages, benefits, had bosses who valued loyalty, and the longer you stayed with the company, the better your benefits and bonuses became. This was because they fought to join unions, have their rights protected, and do collective bargaining. Unions were valued and cherished. Employers also valued education and paid higher wages for those who had it. At the same time, you could walk straight in out of high school and start in the most basic of positions, and work your way up in any jobs that didn't require extensive training. A person who had worked their way up from the bottom and had lots of experience was valued more than a newly graduated university student. But university graduates always started at a higher rate of pay. The cost of living was also significantly lower, and people were able to find housing that was around 30% of their take-home pay. Employers now want loyalty but offer none in return, and expect workers to behave as obedient slaves. Don't ask questions, work 80 to 100 hours a week.
Care must be taken that this guide hole is in the center. The drill is then hand-fed into this center hole.
But except for being paid for 35 hours, no benefits, no bonuses, no respect for the workers' basic human rights. Number 26. Nostalgia of Rudolph's show. Cartoons are on 24/7 now. Nothing special about them and nothing to anticipate when they're on all the time. Rudolph was always one of those specials, alongside Charlie Brown and the other Rankin Bass productions that you could always rely on coming on during the Christmas season. Much like comfort food, it's something you can always go back to. In the 1960s, a local radio station would have someone read the colored comics that came with the Saturday paper. Boomers would follow along and grasp what the sounds looked like on paper. Number 25. Ban them all. Boomers today complain about how the government tried to ban fun in the 1960s. Every year, it seemed like the government banned something new, especially if it made noise or could be lit on fire. One popular game involved flattening bottle caps with a hammer, a harmless and fun activity that got banned. Then came whippersnappers, small firecrackers that popped on contact, which also got banned. Even lightning snake-shaped fireworks that expanded was eventually outlawed. Interestingly, these bans sparked a rebellious spirit in some kids, making them question the need for so many restrictions, especially for harmless fun. Number 24. Constant surveillance. Boomers express relief at not having grown up under constant surveillance. They believe it allowed for more open communication, even if it involved the occasional argument, potentially settled with a punch in the mouth or a stern lecture. However, such disagreements wouldn't be immortalized online, potentially causing future problems. Kids in the 1960s experienced a very different childhood compared to today. Back then, playtime often meant unsupervised adventures. Without constant adult watch or the ability to be easily contacted, children had the freedom to explore their surroundings and develop independence.
Your host will be shocked, Valiant, to see his kindness repaid with such treachery. Ready?
This era also lacked the constant photographic documentation prevalent today. There weren't cameras capturing every scrape, silly moment, or argument. This absence offered a sense of privacy. Number 23. Adventures of Prince Valiant and Queen Alita. In the 1960s, Sunday mornings meant something special. The arrival of the colorful Sunday paper comics. These weren't just black and white strips, they were bursting with vibrant artwork and captivating stories. Some of the favorites were the adventures of Prince Valiant and Queen Alita, a world of knights and princesses. But the fun didn't stop there. Boomers had a mischievous trick up their sleeves, Silly Putty. They'd press it on their favorite comics like Beetle Bailey, Dondi, Hagar the Horrible, or Dagwood, and magically, the ink would transfer, creating a cool imprinted copy on the putty. Number 22. Summer Freedom. Imagine a time before cell phones and organized activities. In the 1960s, summer freedom for kids meant grabbing a simple lunch, a sandwich, a dog bone for your furry companion, and a thermos filled with refreshing Kool-Aid. Packed in a brown paper bag, this was all you needed for a day of adventure. With your trusty bike and your loyal dog by your side, the world was your playground. You could explore a nearby creek. Its cool water perfect for splashing or skipping stones. The open road stretched before you, inviting hours of carefree pedaling under the warm summer sun. When you needed a break, a shady park offered a welcome respite, a place to relax, recharge, and maybe even trade stories with other kids on similar expeditions. These simple pleasures, a packed lunch, a bike ride with your dog, and the freedom to explore, defined a quintessential summer day for many kids in the 1960s. Number 21. Barbie Pool Party with Tadpoles. Imagine a summer afternoon in the 1960s. Instead of video games, boomers had adventures in their own backyards. Picture this. You've spent an afternoon exploring near the railroad tracks, and guess what you found? Tadpoles. These tiny frogs-to-be sparked your curiosity. Armed with a library book full of fascinating facts, you learned about how to care for these little creatures. Your prized possession, a bright pink Barbie party pool, became transformed into a tadpole haven. Filling it with fresh water, you meticulously recreated their natural environment. Watching them grow and change with each passing day became a source of endless fascination.
Let's set them on the plate. We've got our mushrooms, our tomatoes, and our zucchini. Yum, yum.
This wasn't just play. It was a chance to connect with nature, learn responsibility, and witness the magic of metamorphosis firsthand. So next time you see a puddle teeming with tadpoles, remember it might just be the start of an unforgettable summer adventure. Number 20. The Witch is Out, Kick the Can, and Tag. In the 1960s, children spent their days playing outdoors with friends until the streetlights flickered on. Games like Tag, The Witch is Out, and Kick the Can were neighborhood favorites, bringing together kids of all ages. Streets became their playgrounds, filled with laughter and the joyous shouts of childhood. This era boasted a sense of security that's hard to imagine today. Adults, often relaxing on their porches, watched over the games, creating a natural sense of community and safety. Children didn't worry about being unsafe. The concept was almost foreign. They simply played, free and carefree, under a blanket of trust and innocence. Number 19. Riding in the bed of a pickup truck. Boomers missed the days when you could just pile everyone into the truck and go. Forget buckling up in the back seat for many kids. The coolest ride was in the back of a pickup truck. Imagine the wind whipping through your hair, the endless sky overhead, and the world whizzing by as you bounced along on the truck bed. It wasn't just transportation, it was an open-air adventure. This wasn't just about practicality, though. Pickup beds became a rolling hangout spot. Kids would pile in with friends and family, all squished together for the ride. It was a chance to sing along to the radio, tell stories under the stars, or simply enjoy the freedom of the open road.
Grandma's chilling in a wheelchair. She's strapped in, too, look. Hey!
Of course, safety wasn't at the forefront back then, so looking back, it might seem a little wild. But for those who experienced it, riding in the back of a pickup truck in the 1960s was a nostalgic symbol of simpler times and wide-open possibilities. Number 18. Candy cigarettes. Boomers back then enjoyed treats like candy cigarettes, which were sugary sticks that looked just like grown-up cigarettes, without the smoke, of course. Then picture the satisfying clink of returning empty glass bottles. Earning a nickel deposit for each one added up quickly, enough for an ice-cold Pepsi or Coke in a glass bottle. These weren't twist-off tops. You needed a bottle opener to pop the top, adding a touch of grown-up accomplishment to enjoying that sweet reward. And for a playful puff, there were bubblegum cigarettes. These weren't for smoking, but for blowing bubbles that puffed out a harmless cloud of powder. The 1960s offered simple pleasures that sparked creativity and imagination, making playtime an adventure. Number 17. Ice cream trucks. In the 1960s, the arrival of the ice cream truck was a thrilling event for boomers. The distinctive music served as a delicious siren song, drawing them outside with pockets full of change. Unlike today, where ice cream is readily available in stores, these mobile vendors brought frozen treats directly to neighborhoods. We often see women in their 70s who still retain that sense of anticipation. How she waits expectantly with cash in hand highlights the excitement and simple joy this summertime ritual brought to children back then. While ice cream trucks are less common today, their enduring appeal is evident in people's reaction. A sweet reminder of a simpler time. Number 16. Building forts and tree houses. Boomers had backyards that weren't just for playing catch. A large tree was their personal jungle gym. With a strong grip and a sense of adventure, kids would scramble up branches, testing their agility and reaching for new heights. These leafy havens became clubhouses, forts, and lookout points, fostering creativity and imagination. The thrill of the climb and the expansive view from the top branches offered a sense of accomplishment and a world away from everyday life.
Some of the events or a repetition of the events that have taken place here in Los Angeles recently.
Climbing trees weren't just fun. It helped kids develop natural, important skills like balance, coordination, and problem solving. Sometimes a scraped knee or a climb gone wrong might have led to a trip to the doctor's office, but the memories made were priceless. Number 15. Bullies in the school. Childhood innocence extended to school hallways. While kids could be mean, let's face it, that's timeless. Attending school wasn't overshadowed by the fear of violence. The concept of a school shooting or major security threat simply wasn't a part of a child's daily reality. This allowed students to focus on learning and socializing without the constant weight of worry. The worst punishment you could get is either sitting in the corner or in the principal's office, where they would scold you and call your mom. However, it's important to acknowledge that the 1960s weren't perfect. Bullying certainly existed, and safety concerns did arise in other aspects of life. This glimpse into the past highlights how societal anxieties have evolved, impacting even the seemingly carefree world of childhood. In almost all neighborhoods, most mothers didn't work, so they were home when boomers got out of school. No childcare was needed. You usually came home, played outside for a while, did your homework, had dinner, and watched TV. Number 14. Touchscreens everywhere. Boomers complain about the presence of touchscreens everywhere. Cars with touchscreens pose significant safety risks due to their design, which requires drivers to take their eyes off the road. This distraction contributes to the growing problem of distracted driving. Unlike physical buttons, touchscreens demand visual attention and can lead to longer periods of inattention because of their complexity.
Apple, for example, has an easy-to-use touch interface on the iPad and a great desktop UI on the Mac, but these two look very different.
In older cars equipped with physical controls, drivers can manage functions like the radio and climate control without looking away from the road. This capability allows for quicker adjustments and enhances overall driving safety. Reintroducing physical buttons or similar controls could mitigate the risks associated with touchscreen interfaces, making driving a safer experience. Number 13. Viet Kong. The Vietnam War involvement of the United States escalated in the mid-1960s. Before then, special forces like the Green Berets acted as military advisors, training South Vietnamese troops. This early presence hinted at the war's difficulty. Leaders worried that a communist victory in South Vietnam could trigger a domino effect, causing neighboring countries to fall under communist control. This domino effect would grant the Soviet Union a strategic advantage in the Cold War. While some argue the U.S. achieved its goal of training a self-sufficient South Vietnamese army, many veterans still see the war as a defeat. It also sparked a cultural divide between generations in the 1960s. Many young people felt the war was unjustified, unlike past conflicts like World War II. They saw the war through a different lens than their parents, shaped by body counts and news reports exposing political dishonesty. Boomers highlight the anxieties of a teenager with multiple brothers directly exposed to the war's dangers, fueling a growing anti-war sentiment among youth.
The communists rode bicycles, each loaded with half a ton of food, clothing, ammunition, or medical supplies, and
Number 12. World War II and the Civil Rights Movement. World War II exposed a glaring inconsistency in America: racial segregation. The nation championed democracy abroad, yet black Americans faced discrimination at home. This contradiction spurred the Civil Rights Movement. President Roosevelt established the Fair Employment Practices Committee to address discrimination in wartime industries. Later, President Truman desegregated the military through an executive order. While these were early steps, the urgency for civil rights grew as Cold War tensions eased. President Johnson recognized the hypocrisy and saw an opportunity. He broke with Southern tradition and made civil rights a key part of his agenda, paving the way for a landmark legislation in the 1960s. The 1960s civil rights movement wasn't just about activism. It was about the nation finally being receptive to change. Prior to the 1950s, various factors hindered progress. The early 20th century saw a decline in race relations. The Great Depression dominated the 1930s, and World War II consumed the 1940s.
And common sense. Second, I shall appoint an advisory committee of distinguished Americans to assist Governor College in his assignment.
Television emerged as a key factor, bringing national attention to the injustices faced by African Americans. Legal victories were also crucial. While Plessy v. Ferguson allowed segregation, Brown v. the Board in 1954 signaled the court's willingness to dismantle Jim Crow. The civil rights movement effectively utilized the legal system and federal government to dismantle discriminatory laws and practices, creating a window for progress that hadn't existed before. Number 11. The Cuban Missile Crisis. Boomers saw a time of high tension due to the Cold War. In 1959, Fidel Castro seized power in Cuba and turned it into a communist state. He allied Cuba with the Soviet Union. At the time, the USA and Soviet Union were opposing each other in the Cold War, which lasted from 1947 to 1991. There was a constant threat of nuclear war between the two superpowers. The United States stationed nuclear missiles in Turkey, which could quickly reach Soviet territory. In response, the Soviet Union attempted to place similar missiles in Cuba, putting the American mainland within striking distance. The U.S. discovered this secret installation and imposed a naval blockade around Cuba, preventing further construction. The Soviets challenged the blockade, raising anxieties globally as both superpowers engaged in heated rhetoric. After nearly 2 weeks, the standoff was resolved when the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, and the leader of the USSR, Nikita Khrushchev, reached a secret agreement. Khrushchev agreed to remove the Soviet missiles from Cuba, and Kennedy agreed not to invade Cuba and to secretly remove U.S. nuclear missiles from Turkey. It's widely considered to be the point at which the world was closest to nuclear war. Tensions were so high between the U.S. and the USSR that one wrong move could have led to a complete nuclear annihilation.
From U.S. Naval Base Guantanamo Bay, 7 fighters, 12 attack, and 5 patrol aircraft.
Number 10. Watergate Scandal. In the 1970s, a dark chapter unfolded in American politics. During his re-election campaign, President Nixon authorized a break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters. This attempt at espionage aimed to gather intel on their opponents. However, the plan went awry when the burglars were caught red-handed. Instead of accepting accountability, Nixon and his advisors embarked on a desperate attempt to conceal their involvement. However, the tenacious work of investigative journalists at the Washington Post and the New York Times exposed the cover-up. Public trust shattered, and the weight of evidence led to Nixon's impeachment by the House of Representatives. Facing certain conviction in the Senate, Nixon resigned, the only president in U.S. history to do so. The Watergate scandal remains a stark reminder of the importance of a free press and the consequences of abusing power. The reason this scandal is the go-to example of political corruption is because it followed a series of events and trends that seemed like a pattern of disappointments. The Vietnam War, high-profile assassinations, the counterculture, civil rights and its backlash and related riots, etc. For many, it killed off the notion that came from World War II about American institutions being good and worthy of some sort of trust. Number 9. The Marshall Plan. After how bad the 30s and 40s were because of the global depression and the Second World War, the 50s must have been heaven for the generation who were putting their lives back together. The 1950s in America thrived in a unique global situation. Unlike most Allied nations, the war bypassed U.S. soil, leaving its cities and factories unscathed. This advantage, coupled with the Marshall Plan, positioned America as a major economic power. The sacrifices made by the U.S. paled in comparison to its allies. Over 27 million Soviet lives were lost compared to America's 300,000. Furthermore, the social programs enacted under President Franklin D. Roosevelt provided a safety net for many. This era also saw a strong union presence, with 1/5 of the workforce covered, and a vibrant domestic manufacturing industry. However, the seeds of change were being sown. The widespread suburban sprawl of later decades had yet to take root.
To be quite clear,
This unprecedented endeavor of the new world to help the old is neither sure nor easy.
Number 8. All in range. In the boomer generation, the average yearly income was around $3,500, translating to roughly $300 a month. Renting a home for $60 back then would have equated to about 20% of your monthly paycheck, similar to the recommended 28% for housing costs today. While $60 may seem incredibly cheap, it's important to consider the context. These were often brand new houses, requiring minimal maintenance for several years. Today, buying a 1950s home might come with substantial repair costs due to potential neglect by previous owners. This factor, along with a lower cost of living, helps explain why many families in the 50s could afford not only a house, but additional luxuries and an earlier retirement. Number 7. Driving into the movie. Drive-in movies are a nostalgic symbol across all generations these days, but only boomers truly remember the experience in its golden age. Drive-in movie theaters were a popular destination in the 1950s. While the movies themselves were an attraction, the social scene was the major draw. People could freely move about the outdoor theater, checking in with friends and family. Sneaking in refreshments of all kinds was not uncommon. The informality allowed groups to turn their car into a party zone, potentially moving between different groups throughout the evening.
We like to use an outdoor inflatable movie screen. It self-inflates in just a few seconds, and this screen is huge, which makes...
Alternatively, couples or families could enjoy privacy within their own car, talking and laughing without disrupting the movie for others. This flexibility made drive-ins a popular choice for a variety of social experiences. Number 6. No subscriptions. The 1950s offer a stark contrast to today's entertainment landscape dominated by subscriptions. Back then, accessing movies, and television followed a simpler model. Music came on vinyl records purchased at a music store. Movie nights involved a trip to the theater, and television offered a limited number of free channels to choose from. While commercials existed, there were no monthly subscription fees or tiered systems with varying ad loads. The shift towards subscription-based entertainment, while offering vast libraries of content, has undeniably changed the way we consume media.
In my pocket, a couple of adverts. What?
Number 5. More personalized customer service. In the 1950s, customer service was a person-to-person experience. Customers would directly connect with a live operator, eliminating the need to navigate automated menus or chatbots. While some may find today's automated systems convenient, they often lead to frustration. These systems can be time-consuming, requiring customers to choose from irrelevant options before connecting with a human representative. Transfers between multiple representatives can further extend the process. The direct interaction of the 1950s offered a more streamlined and potentially more personalized customer service experience. Number 4. Internet-connected appliances. Boomers don't want their darn refrigerator connected to the internet. In the 1950s, home appliances were designed for one purpose: to perform a specific function reliably. Refrigerators kept food cold, washing machines cleaned clothing, and ovens baked perfect cakes. There was no internet connectivity, no need for software updates, and certainly no concerns about hacking. While some may find this lack of smart features inconvenient, it offered a sense of security and simplicity. This simpler approach prioritized function and reliability over the potential benefits and risks associated with today's internet-connected appliances. Boomers' favorite ad to pick on is in the ads for the fridge. It shows off that you can press a button on the screen to show you what's inside the fridge. Like just opening the fridge is such a hassle. We understand that you can also look it up on your phone when you're out, and that's the true use case. But that's not what they show in the commercial. Boomers also think that they're security risks, more expensive, have more failure points, and provide minimal utility at best.
See the Hoover-matic washer at your Hoover retailers. 126 guineas. Heater model, just 7 guineas extra.
Number 3. Closeknit communities. Communities within neighborhoods were the highlight of the boomer generation. People, especially the older folks around, might sit out on the porch in the afternoons, and if you were going by, you might stop and chat. Kids were treated like an extra grandchild by several of the older folks in the area. Looking back, it almost seems magical how there was a community among people who held a common bond of just living nearby each other. Boomers argue about the breakdown of logical and geographical social fabric, especially with the pandemic. Once upon a time, your major points of social interaction were with your local community who supported each other as friends and neighbors, feeding each other, social bonds, looking out for each other's loved ones, keeping an eye on the neighborhood, block parties, communal rituals. It's not that that doesn't exist anymore, but we know that younger people have very little exposure to it as compared to the generation that came up in the middle of the last century. Houses have largely become fortresses of comfortable interiority, rather than communal gathering places, and we lose huge amounts of social cohesion when we lose this. The fact that for many people, inviting someone in the community over in need to feed them and let them have a hot shower is more of a chore than a sense of responsibility is an indicator of this social decline. Local institutions rot on the vine as phones, and the internet suck all our energy and attention into national problems over which we have minimal control. In the 1950s, many neighborhoods fostered a strong sense of community. Residents often knew their neighbors well, participating in social gatherings and looking out for one another.
Are you serious? When we found out that we were going to get this baby, Chandler and I started talking, and we decided that we didn't want to raise a kid in the city.
This close-knit atmosphere is something many people today find appealing. While we may recognize our neighbors, a deeper level of connection seems less common. Street parties for celebrations and a general sense of mutual support were hallmarks of these communities. Number 2, nothing is made to last. Boomers argue that absolutely everything is disposable nowadays. Nothing is made to last anymore. If you find something you like, it'll be worn out in a year and probably not made anymore when you want to buy a replacement. It's the absolute worst with clothing and kids' toys. It discourages kids from being nice with and taking care of their possessions. Why does it matter when it's going to get worn out so quickly and they'll be brought a replacement? We also think it's a shame that these kids won't have their toys to pass on to their own children because they couldn't last. Jeans originally became so popular because of their durability and affordability. They really appealed to the working class man whose clothes were constantly getting worn out and didn't have the money to constantly spend on new clothing. Now, if you want a pair of jeans of that quality, it's $60+.
Stitching on them, colorful stitching, contrasting, to give it some more decoration. So these aren't...
Number 1, glorification of mental illness. Boomers argue that society is slowly putting much more emphasis on people accepting their faults than working on them, and no one takes responsibility anymore. It's always blame the corporations, blame the schools, blame the food, the drugs, the mental issues, the media, the economy, the racism or sexism that isn't even there half the time. There's always an excuse for people's crappy behavior. Boomers themselves promoted the exact opposite to an extreme by not even acknowledging mental health issues as a factor, and as a result, we fear we've overcorrected too hard. Today's society is way too materialistic. Most people can't go 1 year without upgrading their phone or buying the latest and greatest GPU. Your last year's model will work just fine. Children are so coddled and overprotected nowadays. Bring back the playgrounds of boomers where the monkey bars were sky high and the merry-go-rounds could go Mach 5. If the kids fall and get a bruise, they'll know not to be a dummy next time, which is an invaluable life lesson. Teach them how to responsibly handle dangerous objects like knives and garden tools. The way we're raising children today is one of the many reasons we have so many adults with no valuable life skills.